Dr. Tierney, here we are today at a very important day where the marketing administration takes over in Argentina. A very long wait for a lot of people in Argentina, a lot of friends of ours, a lot of contacts of ours. This sort of change in government ideals, if you will. Listen, lots of talk in the market regarding what does this really mean for the peso? What does this really mean for soybean exports out of Argentina? So let's have a nice little discussion about that. I guess start out with your thoughts on the entire subject, and possibly as well, what does that mean for expansion of corn acreage in Argentina?
Well, let's talk about soybeans first. Sure. I think that's the crop that we're most likely to see a market impact in the very short run. The reason for that is because the USDA estimates that Argentina will have 14 million metric tons of carry-out stocks as of March 31st, which is the end of their marketing year. Now, customarily, what we see is very little or almost zero soybean exports from about December until early April. But if you've got 14 million metric tons that's sitting there on farm, and all of a sudden you get a reduction in the export tax, which had been 35%. They said they're going to reduce it to 30%. And then possibly you get a devaluation. Now, there's been a lot of talk that they're not going to devalue overnight to the real market value. But one way to assess the real market value is to take a look at the blue rate, which is the unofficial street rate for the exchange, versus the official rate. And according to data that's published on Reuters, there's a 50% difference between the blue rate and the official rate. So theoretically, the true market rate for the peso could be 50%. Nobody expects it, if the government does devalue, it's going to do it by that amount. But the point is, if there is a devaluation, let's say 15%, that provides a significant financial signal to farmers to sell any remaining stocks that they've been holding on to. So it's quite possible that we could see what I call a fat tail to the Argentine soybean export season, where all of a sudden in months like December, January, February, March, where you don't have any exports, you might have 1, 2, or 3 million metric tons of exports during that time period. And
especially, Bill, complementing what you just said very well, you're talking about, well, first of all, right, we talked to possibly 10 different contacts, and these 10 different contacts are going to give you 8 to 10 different numbers of estimates of what they think Argentina holds right now. But I think that 14 million metric ton is a very reasonable number. But let's even be more conservative. Call it 10, call it 12. I've heard numbers as high as 20, numbers as low as 8. At the end of the day, it's a lot of soybeans. And the Argentinian farmer is cash strapped. I mean, he's been really selling hand to mouth for years, using soybeans as his quote-unquote savings account, if you will. And the problem that we have right now, you call it a fat tail, absolutely. And you can call it a fat tail or a fat beginning, if you will, to the export program that very likely is going to kick in again strongly in April. And we're not even mentioning my homeland of Brazil. What are these guys going to do, and how much are they going to produce, and how much they're going to export? And you've been keeping us up to date on how much Brazil has been exporting. We're now possibly going to export close to 55 million metric tons of soybeans. I was going to ask you about that. You just got back today from a week and a half long trip down to Brazil to see customers. You were driving all over Mato Grosso. You talked to some of the largest soybean producers in the world. What's your take on, number one, what does the soybean crop look like? And number two, what's that mean for exports next year? Absolutely. The crop, it was interesting that the day that I was in southern Mato Grosso driving around and visiting some of these large clients, I started receiving lots of emails talking about dryness in Mato Grosso and pictures of these horrible crops. And I replied back to some of our folks here, and I said, I don't know what you guys are looking at. But then I sent pictures of me in the car and looking at the crops when it's raining and all of that. So, and at the end of the day, look, you mentioned correctly, we now consult over a quarter of the soybean area in Mato Grosso. So we have a lot of coverage in the area. And I got to tell you, the pictures that clients sent to me from very different areas of Mato Grosso, I would tell you that 90% of the stuff looks great. Yeah, you have about 5 to 10% that's being affected. At the end of the day, my estimate today, for AGI Brazil, we stand pat at about 100.6 million metric tons. and we're really going to start making major adjustments to the crop only I'd say, the first week of January, when we have an idea of what December weather was like, and we have sort of a view into the first 2 weeks of January, 2 to 3 weeks of January, because that's what's critical weather in Brazil is for the crop, is late December to about first week of January. It's sort of our August here for the crop here.
So 100 million, 101 million metric ton crop.
Sure, if you will.
Was that implied for exports?
Lots of exports. Now, the key for exports, as you know very well, it's going to be the exchange.
Right.
If the exchange rate stays above 3.4, 3.3 reais to the dollar, you're going to still see strong Brazilian exports. I would even venture to say if the exchange rate is above 3, as a matter of fact. Now, if it goes all the way down to 3 from where it's at currently at 3.7, 3.8, the farmer's going to feel a lot of pain.
Okay.
Because if Chicago prices stay, hovering between, call it $8 to $10, with a 3 to 1 real, it's a lot worse than 4 to 1. Okay. So you have to, but at the end of the day, Brazil looks to export a lot, and they're going to have competition from their neighbors to the south as well. So, well, I'm Pedro Deneca, president of AGR LATAM, and also AGR Brazil, servicing our Latin American clients and global clients with information from South America. And this is Dr. Bill Tierney. This is our chief economist here for Ag Resource Company in Chicago. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you then.